Thank you so much for having me here today. I just wanted to thank everyone who's been involved in this process, planning this amazing event. I am Becky Kekula. I'm the director of the Disability Equality Index at Disability In, the national organization overseeing the affiliates. And I've been in this role for about 3 years now. I myself identify as someone with dwarfism who's proud to be part of the disability community. I struggled to find my first job after receiving a college degree, and I do this work now to help prevent that from happening to people like me in the future. So thank you all for being here and for your interest in this work. I want to start off by talking about the Are You In campaign that Disability In launched in honor of the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act this past July, but we continue to grow the campaign, and so far we have 26 CEOs who've committed to advance disability inclusion in their organization through participating in tools like the Disability Equality Index. And you can go to ruin.org to continue to see the growing list as we announce new companies over the time, including companies based here in Wisconsin. So investors, in addition to CEOs, we have 25 investors that have committed to holding the companies who ask them for money accountable for advancing disability inclusion and engaging in tools like the Disability Equality Index. So this growing list can continue to be found at disabilityequalityindex.org. A little background on the Disability Equality Index for those who may not be as familiar with the tool. It is a self-assessment that companies take to benchmark their disability inclusion practices. It's targeted for companies with 500 or more employees, but the questions live out in the public domain, so any companies who are smaller than having 500 employees can take the questions and apply as they see fit. We're going into our 7th year in 2021. It started out as a pilot in 2014, and we continue to grow participation. In 2020, we had 247 companies, and over 150 were part of the Fortune 1000. The ultimate goal is to get the Fortune 1000 to participate, and we would love everyone's assistance. The Disability Equality Index Best Place to Work logo is an honor that companies receive if they score 80, 90, or 100. They're named Best Place to Work for Disability Inclusion. It helps them attract future customers and future employees with disabilities. Those companies who participate and score below 80, nobody knows that they participated. We do not announce your name anywhere. We have your confidentiality, and we take pride in making sure that we assist you as you're getting started on your journey. And we want you to participate, even if you don't think you're going to be a top scoring company right away. It allows you to build a roadmap and plan out the future and figure out where you can improve when it comes to including people with disabilities in your workplace. We have a strong partnership with the American Association of People with Disabilities. They've been our partner since the beginning of this tool. Ted Kennedy Jr., who lost his leg to bone cancer many years ago, is a strong advocate, a disability rights lawyer, and he happens to be the board chair of American Association of People with Disabilities. He's been a huge help when it comes to getting those investors and CEOs committed to really making sure that disability inclusion is a priority. This goes into a little bit more detail about the DEI. It's an annual benchmarking tool, so the 2021 DEI will measure calendar year 2020. It's meant to educate the business community on disability inclusion best practices. This is the one area where corporations, even in the same industry, are coming together to try to solve the unemployment rate problem for people with disabilities. They're sharing best practices in the same rooms. Over 150 Fortune 1000 companies participated in 2020. It allows companies to figure out where they have room for growth, and it measures 6 key areas. The one area that is not weighted, meaning it does not count toward your score, it was introduced in 2019, it was non-US operations. The other categories, other than culture Everything is 10 points. Culture is 20 points because we really think that it is important to start with a disability inclusive culture before you're able to do anything else to advance disability inclusion. This goes into a little bit more detail of the points distribution and the different categories. So culture is really about making sure disability is included in your diversity and inclusion statement, having a disability-related employee resource group, a disability hiring goal, and an engagement survey where people have the ability to self-identify. Then leadership talks about what are people doing who happen to be within 2 levels of the CEO. Do you have senior executive allies? Are senior executives being held accountable in their performance evaluations to include people with disabilities in the workforce? Is there a diversity council where disability is discussed? Enterprise-wide access. This is about building accessibility and website accessibility, making sure you implement plans for both areas. Employment practices, benefits, making sure there are benefits that can help people with disabilities feel protected in the job. Recruitment, making it known that people can ask for an accommodation from the application to the interview to the onboarding process. Employment, education, retention, and advancement, making sure that people with disabilities have an opportunity to move up within your organization. Retention and advancement programs, making sure you communicate that they're open to employees with disabilities and have them in your statement as well. Accommodations. Do you have a centralized accommodations fund? Do you have an accommodations policy, a procedure? Do you track accommodation metrics? What you will find out is accommodation costs aren't as much as you may assume. Most accommodation costs are less than $500 according to the Job Accommodation Network, and having a centralized fund, it will allow you to figure out what people are asking for accommodations for, and sometimes it may be ergonomic needs, and those people may not even identify as having a disability. So you find out a lot of great data if you have a fund that prevents managers from refusing to hire someone with a disability who may ask for accommodations. Community engagement. Are you engaging in the community? Are your employees learning about disability inclusion? Are you putting together focus groups across disability to make sure you're understanding the needs of all types of disabilities? Supplier diversity. I know Disability in Wisconsin is building out a great supplier diversity program. You have a lot of certified disability-owned businesses that are in the network, and we're really encouraging more disability spend when it comes to supplier diversity, not just stopping at the other areas of diversity. And non-US operations. For those companies who have operations outside the US, the rest of the tool is specific to filling it out on behalf of your US operations with over 500 employees, but non-US asks if you have operations outside the US, do you have non-discrimination policy that includes the word disability outside the US, and do you have an employee resource group related to disability outside the US? Usually if people say yes to the culture question around a disability employee resource group, they may be motivated to build one out outside of the US. Congratulations to the Wisconsin-based companies who are among this list of top scoring companies from 2020. So these are the top scoring companies in the 100 category. Then we have the 90 category and the 80 category. All of these logos and this full list can be found at disabilityequalityindex.org. I just want to go over some highlights from the 2020 DEI. Over the course of the DEI, the number of employers has increased from 48 to 247, with a total workforce of over 11 million people. In 2020, 5.5% of employees identified as having a disability, compared to 3.7% in 2019. 3.5% of new hires identified as having a disability compared to 3.2% in 2019. And 205 of the top scoring businesses out of the 247 scored 80 and above, meaning they were a top scoring company in 2020. Now with the international data from the non-US operations non-weighted category, 75% of participating DEI companies in 2020 said they have operations outside the US. Of the non-US based employees, 186 companies who said they have operations outside of the US have a workforce of 7,496,147 people. 75% of multinational companies reported operations outside the US have a disability inclusive standards of non-discrimination in the workplace compared to 69 in 2019. And then 42% of multinational companies also report their non-US operations have a disability ERG compared to 41 in 2019. And all of this information can be found on the Disability Equality Index website, where you can download the full DEI report. And I'm going to go into a few more details from that report in the next few slides. We identified the areas of success. So this is a compilation of the data from the 247 companies that participated. In culture, out of the 97% of businesses with the diversity and inclusion statement, 85% of them specifically mentioned disability. In leadership, 88% of businesses with a diversity council have a member who is openly public about their disability and/or an ally or supporter for persons with disabilities. One way to display this is getting leaders to get engaged in this work and have allies. Enterprise-wide access, 70% of businesses have an accessibility expert. They could be someone who's internal or external. In accommodations, 94% of businesses have a written disability accommodation procedure that allows people to understand how to request an accommodation. In recruitment, 89% of businesses are focused on external recruitment efforts and hiring people with disabilities. It's really important when you're thinking about this external recruitment effort, when you're talking to colleges and universities, make sure that the career centers are talking to the disability services centers, because you want to make sure that people with disabilities in the schools are being considered for jobs. Community engagement, 95% of businesses have provided philanthropic support to external disability-related organizations. In areas for improvement, 64% of businesses have a company-wide commitment to digital accessibility. This is compared to 59 in 2019. In benefits, 69% of businesses have mental health benefits above and beyond what's required by law, compared to 62% in 2019. And with this question specifically, I know mental health is a big topic these days. It's very important to think about other ways outside of what's required by law to support your employees, especially during times like this. And in accommodations, 60% of businesses are tracking accommodation metrics compared to 53 in 2019. Companies who have a centralized accommodations fund can track metrics a little bit easier than those that may not be able to. For employment practices, 72% of businesses with employee retention and advancement programs have programs focused on employees with disabilities. It could be a women's leadership program. You just need to make sure that you say that women with disabilities are eligible to apply to this program. Supplier diversity, 64% of businesses with public-facing websites list organizations like Disability:IN, who's the certifying body for disability-owned businesses, a 10% increase from 2019. In non-US operations, 75% of the 75% of businesses with non-US operations have non-discrimination policies that include the word disability applying to employees outside the US. Opportunities for growth. So this is where all of the companies have room for improvement. In culture, 95% of businesses use a company-wide employee engagement survey, but only 38% review the data for employees who've identified as having a disability. 88% of businesses have a diversity council, but only 65% have a mission that includes disability inclusion. Enterprise-wide access, 60% of businesses have a web accessibility policy, but only 56% of them are auditing their internal sites. It's important, especially when you go down the journey of web accessibility, to think about your external and internal websites in the same way, because you want your internal websites to be accessible so employees can have access to them. And sometimes it's the employees with disabilities who can help be the solution to help you make those sites more compatible. In recruitment, only 45% of participants ask all candidates during the interview scheduling process if they need a reasonable accommodation. I'd like to see this number go up. I think it's very important to put it out there when you're setting up the interview, the date, time, and location, whether it's on the phone or over email. Make sure that you make it known someone can ask for an accommodation so they feel empowered to do so. Supplier diversity. Only 25% of businesses have a company-wide disability-focused goal in supplier diversity. Hopefully we can see that go up because it is a goal after all, and companies can figure out how to work there after they set the goal. In community engagement, 62% of businesses have a smartphone app available for the public, but only 46% of them audit them for accessibility. As we look forward to 2021, we're currently in the registration period for 2021 through January 29th, 2021. A few months back in December of 2019, we put together some groups to identify some areas in the DEI that have not been updated. We did an introduction of supplier diversity in 2018, 2019. We made some updates to some questions that were really important to the disability community. And then this year we decided we wanted to make some updates to categories that we hadn't really touched in a while to modernize them. And what we view as modernization is adding clarity to any questions that have already existed and are already weighted. And we added new non-weighted questions. When we add new non-weighted questions, it means they don't count toward your score for at least a year's time. So in enterprise-wide access, we added clarity to the existing 7 weighted question sets. So the intent is very similar to the intent in 2020, but we just wanted to add some additional clarity. And then we added 1 new non-weighted question about innovative technology. And in benefits, we added clarity to the existing 3 weighted question sets. There was a question about personal assistance services benefits, and we feel that it would be placed better in accommodations, so we moved that over to accommodations. It will remain non-weighted. Long-term care coverage, we removed that benefit, but we added 6 new non-weighted question sets. Supplemental long-term disability, vision care coverage, wellness benefits. So this is in addition to the mental health benefits, what wellness benefits may you be offering. Information about ABLE savings account plans or special needs trust, paid caregiver leave, and delivering benefits information to employees in accessible formats. There are several questions throughout the DEI where you have a procedure and then there's a question of, is this communicated to employees? It's very important to make sure that employees know how to access what you're offering. And you want to make sure that it's accessible. In accommodations, we added clarity to the 4 weighted question sets. One of the pieces of clarity we added was the centralized accommodations fund question. It can also be a budget line item where a manager is not penalized if they go over in that budget line because they're able to support an employee accommodation request. Then we added 2 questions around services for deaf and hard of hearing employees and flexible work options for employees with disabilities. I know in the times we're in, a lot of us have the accommodation of working from home, but we want to make sure when it is safe to physically go back in the workspace, there is an option for people with disabilities to still have that option, but maybe there are more people who may want to continue to work from home and they should be supported in that option as well. We just don't want to go backwards in physical or digital accessibility, and we need to have options because people may have different needs and requests. In supplier diversity, we didn't add any new questions, but we added clarity to 4 questions. So what happened was the 4 groups that got together, they were subject matter experts in these areas. They brought recommendations to the Disability Equality Index Advisory Committee, who came up with the original questions for the tool, and then those were approved and put forward as we plan ahead for the 2021 survey, which will open on February 1st. So registered companies have until January 29th, And then on February 1st, they'll be able to start filling out the DEI on the portal. They'll have till April 9th, and then we'll announce the top scoring companies at the national conference in July. These are additional resources for everyone to take a look at, and feel free to even just go to the disabilityequalityindex.org website. In the last bullet point, we have a portal for best practices where we continue to publish best practice reports based on information that companies submit. Underneath each of the categories in the DEI, companies are allowed to submit up to 3 best practices related to that category. And then we work with the companies to figure out how to turn them into information that can be shared in reports. So we continue to encourage companies to share best practices as we build out more resources